Yoon Hana stood in the center of the Galactic Council chamber for the 23rd time. The room was enormous, carved from dark stone that floated in the middle of space, and filled with hundreds of alien delegates from across the galaxy. Some had scales, some had too many eyes, some breathed through tubes connected to tanks on their backs. All of them looked down at her from their elevated seats like she was something small and unimportant. She had prepared her speech for weeks. She spoke clearly, without emotion, laying out every reason why Earth deserved full membership in the Council. 50 years had passed since first contact. Humanity had followed every rule. They had paid every tax. They had submitted to every inspection. They had done everything the Council had asked of them, and more. When she finished, the chamber was silent for exactly 4 seconds. Grand Arbiter Voshan, a tall creature with pale gray skin and 3 sets of arms folded neatly across his chest, leaned forward in his high seat. His voice echoed through the chamber like a disappointed teacher speaking to a child who had asked the same stupid question again. "The petition is denied," he said. "Humanity has not yet demonstrated sufficient cultural maturity for full integration. The provisional period is extended. Next matter." That was it. 2 sentences. 50 years of obedience, dismissed in 2 sentences. Hana did not flinch. She did not argue. She bowed her head slightly, turned, and walked out of the chamber with her back straight and her heels clicking on the stone floor. The delegates were already talking about trade routes before she reached the door. She was young, only 26, and she had been assigned as Hana's communications officer 3 months ago. She had watched the broadcast of the session on her tablet, and her face was tight with anger. She was trying very hard to hide. "Ambassador," she started. "Send the usual message to Earth," Hana said, not slowing her pace. "The answer is the same." Soren fell into step beside her. They walked through the long curved hallways of the station in silence. Soren had read the history files when she took this posting. She knew what provisional membership really meant. It was supposed to be a 5-year transition period. A chance for new species to learn the rules and adjust. 5 years had turned into 10. 10 into 20. 20 into 50. Every time Earth asked why, the Council gave a different excuse. Cultural maturity. Economic instability. Insufficient diplomatic infrastructure. The reasons changed, but the answer never did. And while Earth waited, the Council squeezed. Human ships were stopped and searched at every checkpoint, sometimes held for days while cargo rotted in the holds. Human colonies were taxed at 3 times the rate of full member worlds. Human scientists were denied access to the shared technology archives that every full member species used freely. When human engineers figured things out on their own anyway, the Council claimed patent violations and seized their work. It was not war. It was something worse. It was a slow, patient humiliation designed to keep humanity small and grateful and quiet. Soren had grown up on one of those taxed colonies. She remembered the alien inspectors walking through her family's home, scanning everything, opening every drawer, while her parents stood in the corner with their hands folded and their eyes on the floor. She was 9 years old. She had asked her mother why they let them do that. Her mother had said, "Because we have to, for now." That was 17 years ago. They reached the embassy, a small set of rooms at the far end of the station, as far from the Council chamber as physically possible. Hana sat down at her desk and pulled up her messages. Soren prepared to leave, but something made her stop. Hana's hands were shaking, not a lot, just a small tremor in her fingers as she scrolled through the reports. Soren had never seen that before. "Ambassador," she said carefully. Hana looked up. Her face was calm, but her eyes were different. There was something behind them that Soren could not name. It was not sadness. It was not defeat. It looked like the last thread of a rope, pulled so tight it was about to snap. There is a new resolution, Hana said quietly. Passed while I was giving my speech. They timed it perfectly. She turned her screen so Soren could read it. It was called the Guidance Mandate. The language was soft and polite, full of words like assistance and developmental support and cooperative oversight. But when Soren read through the diplomatic decorations, the meaning was clear. The Council was assigning one of their officials to Earth, not as a guest, not as an advisor, as an overseer. This person would have the authority to review and approve all major decisions made by Earth's government. Military spending, scientific research, expansion permits, everything. They were appointing a colonial governor. They just used nicer words for it. Soren stared at the screen. She felt something cold settle in her stomach. She looked at Hana and saw that the shaking in her hands had stopped. That was somehow worse. What do we do? Soren asked. Hana did not answer right away. She closed the resolution document and opened something else. A communication channel Soren had never seen before. The interface looked like it had been built decades ago and never updated. There were no labels, no headers, no identification markers. Just a single input field and a send button. Hana typed one word into the field. Baekdu. She pressed send. The screen flashed once, confirming delivery, and then went dark. Hana leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was very quiet and very steady. We do what we have always done, Soren. We endure. But sometimes enduring means deciding that you are done being the one who bends. Soren did not know what Baekdu meant. She did not know where that message had gone, or who would receive it. But she felt something shift in the room, like the air pressure had changed, like a door that had been locked for 50 years had just been opened, and whatever was behind it was already moving. She would not understand until later. None of them would. But somewhere deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon, a light turned on in a room that had been dark for a very long time. And a man named Han Du-yoon read a single word on his screen, set down his tea, and said to the empty room, "Finally." Then he picked up his coat and went to wake up a fleet. The room was buried 3 kilometers beneath the surface of the moon. It had no windows, no decorations, and no name on any official record. The walls were raw stone, lined with cables, and the air smelled like metal and recycled oxygen. 47 screens covered the far wall, each one showing the live status of a ship that the Galactic Council did not know existed. Admiral Han Do-yoon stood in the center of it all, with his coat over his arm and a cup of cold tea still in his hand. He had been sleeping when the word came through. He had not slept well in years, but tonight he would not sleep at all, and that was fine. He had been waiting for this moment for most of his adult life. Around him, the room was filling with people. Officers, engineers, analysts, all of them arriving through tunnels that connected to different parts of the lunar base. They moved quickly and quietly, taking their seats and logging into their stations. Nobody needed to. They had rehearsed this hundreds of times. Shin Tae-ho arrived last. He was a big man, wide across the shoulders and loud in every room he ever entered. But even he was quiet now. He looked at Do-yoon, and Do-yoon looked back, and something passed between them that did not need words. "It's real this time?" Tae-ho asked. "It's real," Do-yoon said. Tae-ho sat down and cracked his knuckles. Good. Bae Ji-yoon appeared on the main screen through a secure connection from a facility beneath the Pacific Ocean. She was the head of Earth's intelligence division, a woman who spoke so softly that people often leaned forward to hear her, and who knew more secrets than anyone alive. Her face was calm, her dark hair pulled back tight, and her eyes showed nothing at all. "I assume everyone has been briefed on the guidance mandate," she said. Tae-ho made a sound like he was spitting something out. They're sending us a colonial governor. That is the final line, Doyen said. Ambassador Yoon has confirmed it. The council passed it unanimously. Not a single species voted against it. Delegate Pori? Someone asked. Abstained, Jian said, which for Pori is as close to rebellion as the Aloni get. Doyen set his tea down and turned to face the room. These were the people who had built humanity's real answer to the council. Not the polite petitions, not the diplomatic smiles. The real answer. 50 years ago, he said, when humanity made first contact, we were naive. We believed that if we followed the rules, we would be accepted. We believed that patience and good behavior would earn us a seat at the table. We were wrong. The council never intended to give us full membership. We were useful as we were, taxed, controlled, and too polite to fight back. He paused. The room was completely silent. Every technology they denied us, we built ourselves. Every time they searched our ships, we scanned theirs back and learned their weaknesses. Every embargo they placed on us forced our scientists to find a better way. They thought they were keeping us down. They were training us. Jian took over. She pulled up a map of council space, a vast web of star systems, trade routes, and fleet positions. Every piece of it was marked with data that no human was supposed to have. Listening devices planted on council relay stations. Communication codes broken and catalogued. Fleet patrol schedules tracked down to the hour. We know where every council warship is right now, Jian said. We know their fuel reserves, their crew rotations, and the names of their captains' children. We know which supply lines are vulnerable and which stations have weak shields. We have been watching them for 30 years, and they never once thought to watch us back. Because they never considered us a threat. Taeho laughed. It was not a kind laugh. Doyun called for Kwon Min-jae, the chief engineer, who had been waiting in the corridor. Min-jae was a thin man, with all-stained hands, and a habit of talking to machines like they were pets. He walked Soren, who had arrived from the council station on a fast shuttle just hours ago, through the heart of the flagship Baekdu. The ship was enormous. Soren had seen council warships before. They were impressive, smooth, elegant, built with centuries of alien engineering. The Baekdu was none of those things. It was heavy and angular, covered in plating that looked like it had been welded on by hand. It was not beautiful. It looked like something that had been built by people who were very angry and very good at math. The council said this drive system was theoretically impossible, Min-jae told Soren, pointing at the glowing core of the engine room. Said the energy requirements would tear any ship apart. He patted the casing of the drive like it was a dog. I built 3 of them. The trick is that they were wrong about the energy requirements. They made an assumption in their calculations that no one ever questioned, because no one ever needed to. We needed to. Soren stared at the drive. It hummed quietly, a deep vibration she could feel in her teeth. How many ships do we have? She asked. 47 capital ships, Min-jae said. Each one carrying weapons that the council does not have a name for yet. Plus support craft, supply vessels, and enough fuel to operate for 18 months without resupply. And the council has no idea? Min-jae smiled. It was a small, tired smile. The council thinks we are still flying the patrol boats they approved for us 20 years ago. They think our biggest ship is a light cruiser, with outdated shields. He shook his head. They never once looked. Doyen gathered his command staff in the briefing room. The plan was simple, because the best plans always were. They would not fire first. They would not attack civilian targets. They would not destroy anything they did not absolutely have to. This was not about revenge. It was about making a point so clear that it could never be misunderstood. We are going to show them what we built, Doyen said. And then we are going to give them a choice. That is all. Taeho raised an eyebrow. And if they choose wrong? Doyen looked at him steadily. Then we show them what the ships can do, but only what is necessary, not one shot more. At exactly midnight, Earth Standard Time, 47 ships lit their engines simultaneously across the solar system. From hidden docks inside asteroids, from beneath the ice of frozen moons, from the dark side of planets where no one ever thought to look. They rose like embers from a fire that had been burning underground for 50 years. Council monitoring stations on the edge of human space detected an energy spike so large that 3 of them automatically flagged it as a sensor malfunction. By the time a living operator reviewed the data and realized it was real, the fleet was already gone, moving faster than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Soren stood on the bridge of the Baekdu and watched the stars stretch into lines. Beside her, Doyun stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his face unreadable. He had not raised his voice once since this began. He had not needed to. Somewhere ahead of them, the Galactic Council sat in their beautiful chamber, talking about trade routes and tax codes, completely unaware that the species they had spent 50 years ignoring had just stood up from the table. And it was already too late to push them back down. The Council Capital Station was the largest structure in the known galaxy. It was a ring of metal and glass that circled a small dead star, and it had been the seat of galactic government for over 2,000 years. 600 species called it the center of civilization. Ships came and went from its docking ports every minute of every day, carrying diplomats, merchants, and soldiers from 1,000 different worlds. It had never been attacked, not once in its entire history. The very idea was considered unthinkable, like trying to punch the sky. The sky punched back at exactly 1400 Council Standard Time. 47 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, arranged in a wide arc directly facing the main viewport of the Council chamber. They appeared without warning, without announcement, and without a single weapon charged. They simply existed where nothing had been a second before, filling the space outside the station like mountains that had grown overnight. The Baekdu sat at the center of the formation. It was the largest of them, and in the pale light of the dead star, its dark angular hull looked like a piece of the void itself had been carved into a shape and given engines. Inside the council chamber, chaos erupted. Delegates scrambled from their seats. Alarm systems screamed. Security teams flooded the corridors. On every screen, the same image appeared. A fleet of human warships, impossibly large, impossibly advanced, sitting in silence outside their window. Grand Arbiter Vashon stood at his elevated podium and stared at the viewport. His 3 sets of arms hung at his sides, and for several long seconds, he did not move. Then he activated his communication panel and called for Warlord Gretton. Gretton was the commander of the Council's enforcement fleet, 300 warships stationed throughout the system, specifically to protect the capital. He was a creature of muscle and armor plating, bred for war by a species that valued nothing else, and he had never lost a battle. He answered Vashon's call within seconds. "I see them," Gretton said. His voice was like rocks grinding together. 300 ships ready. They are outnumbered 6-1. "Remove them," Vashon said. Gretton smiled. At least the muscles around his mouth moved in a way that his species considered a smile. But before a single council ship moved, a broadcast cut through every frequency in the system. Every speaker, every screen, every communication device on the station, and on every ship within range, carried the same voice. It was calm, measured, and absolutely clear. Yunhana spoke. She did not shout. She did not threaten. She read a list. She began with the first broken promise, the 5-year provisional period that became 10. She read the date, the resolution number, and the name of the arbiter who signed it. Then she moved to the next one, the first trade embargo, the first illegal inspection, The first stolen patent. The first colony taxed into poverty. The first human scientist denied archive access. She read every single one. It took 47 minutes. Nobody interrupted her. Nobody could. The broadcast was on every channel, and no one in the Council's technical team could figure out how to shut it off. Across the galaxy, billions of beings listened. Many of them heard things they had never known. Some of them heard things they had known, but had chosen to forget. When Hannah finished the list, she paused for 3 seconds. Then she said, "We asked you to treat us as equals. You chose not to. This is not an act of war. This is a notification. Humanity is no longer asking." The broadcast ended. In the silence that followed, Voshan's voice cut through the chamber. "This is an act of aggression against the Council itself. Warlord Gretton, you have your orders." Gretton's fleet moved. 300 warships advanced toward the human formation, weapons charging, shields raised. They were experienced, well-armed, and confident. They outnumbered the humans 6 to 1. By every calculation, by every piece of military logic the galaxy had ever produced, this should have been a short fight. Admiral Han Do-yun stood on the bridge of the Baekdu and watched them come. Beside him, Taeho tracked the incoming fleet on his tactical display. Soren stood at the communication station, her hands steady, her heart hammering. Around them, the bridge crew worked in silence. 300 ships, closing fast, weapons hot, they're not bluffing. Do-yun nodded slowly. He looked out through the viewport at the approaching wall of alien warships. Then he looked down at his hands. He thought about his parents standing in the corner of their home, while alien inspectors opened their drawers. He thought about every human who had ever lowered their eyes and said, "Yes, sir," to someone who saw them as less. "One shot," Do-yun said. "The flagship only. Forward cannon." Min-jae confirmed the weapon was ready. Taeho locked the target. Soren held her breath. The Baekdu fired. There was no dramatic beam of light. No explosion of color. The weapon was something Min-jae had built in a workshop on the moon, using principles the Council had declared impossible. It moved faster than anything the galaxy had ever measured, and it hit Gretton's flagship dead center. The shot passed through the shields, as if they were not there. It passed through the armor, as if it were paper. It passed through the entire ship, from front to back, and continued into empty space, where it eventually faded into nothing. Gretton's flagship split in two. The halves drifted apart slowly, trailing sparks and debris. Emergency lights flickered inside the broken hull. Escape pods began launching from both sections. One shot, one ship, no second shot needed. Every channel went silent. 300 Council warships stopped advancing. On their bridges, captains and crews stared at their screens and tried to understand what they had just seen. That flagship had the strongest shields in the Council fleet. It was supposed to be able to take dozens of hits from the best weapons in the galaxy. It had been destroyed by a single round from a species that was not even allowed to sit in the Council chamber. Do-yun opened a channel. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "Captains of the Council fleet, my name is Admiral Han Do-yun of the United Earth Fleet. I have no quarrel with any of you. You are soldiers following orders, and I respect that. But the ship you just saw destroyed had the best defenses your galaxy could build. I want you to think about what that means for your ships. Then I want you to go home to your families. This is not your fight. It never was." For 10 seconds nothing happened. Then one ship at the edge of the formation turned away. Then another. Then 5 more. Then 20. The formation dissolved like ice in warm water, ships breaking away and jumping to faster than light speed, vanishing one by one into the dark. Gretton, pulled from the wreckage of his flagship by a rescue shuttle, screamed orders into his communicator. "Return to formation. Resume attack." His voice cracked and broke as he shouted. No one answered. Inside the council chamber, Delegate Puri, small, quiet, and visibly trembling, did something that no Eloni had done in 300 years of council membership. Puri stood up without being recognized and spoke without permission. "Ambassador Yoon," Puri said, voice shaking but clear, "some of us always knew this day would come. Not all of us are your enemy." Hana, still standing at the broadcast podium in the human embassy, heard the words through her earpiece. She closed her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them, they were bright and hard and full of something that looked like the beginning of hope. Grand Arbiter Vaughn stood alone at his podium. The chamber was half empty. Delegates had fled or were hiding. His enforcement fleet was scattered. Outside the viewport, 47 human warships sat in perfect silence. Not a single weapon charged, not a single shield raised. They did not need to. The message had been delivered. Voshan looked at the Bekdu through the glass. He had ruled this council for 112 years. He had managed crises, wars, and plagues. He had never felt what he was feeling now. It was not anger. It was not confusion. It was the sudden, terrible understanding that he had made the worst mistake of his very long life, and that there was absolutely nothing he could do to take it back. 12 hours passed after the council fleet scattered, and humanity did not fire another shot. The 47 ships stayed exactly where they were, engines idling, weapons cold, shields down. They did not advance. They did not blockade the station's docking ports. Supply ships were allowed to come and go freely. No one was stopped, or searched, or questioned. It was, by every definition, the most polite military occupation in the history of the galaxy. And that was what made it so terrifying. Admiral Doyon had given clear orders to every ship in the fleet. No aggressive posture, no targeting locks, no flyovers of the station. Crews were told to stand down from battle stations and rotate to normal shifts. Some of them ate dinner. Some of them played cards. The Baekdu's bridge crew took turns napping in their chairs, while the largest political crisis in galactic history unfolded around them. Shin Taeho thought it was hilarious. "We just broke their entire military in one shot, and now we're sitting here like we're waiting for a bus," he said, leaning back in his chair with his boots on the console. "That is exactly the point," Doyon replied, without looking up from his tea. He had finally gotten a fresh cup. Fear fades. Confusion fades. But this, the image of us sitting here, completely calm, completely unworried. This is what they will remember. This is what will keep them up at night for the next 100 years. Inside the council station, the mood was very different. The hallways were full of whispered conversations and nervous movement. Delegates who had spent centuries looking down on humanity were now walking past the embassy with quick steps and averted eyes. Security teams stood at every intersection, but they had no orders and no plan. What were they supposed to do? The humans had not broken any law. They had not entered the station. They had not made any demands. There, outside the window, patient, waiting. Grand Arbiter Vaughn had not left the council chamber since the fleet arrived. He had spent the night calling allies, calling in favors, and searching for any leverage he could find. He found nothing. The species that might have helped him had either fled or were quietly watching from the sidelines, waiting to see which way the wind blew. 3 of his closest political allies had already sent private messages to the human embassy, expressing their deep concern about the guidance mandate and their sincere hope for peaceful resolution. Vaughn understood what that meant. They were switching sides before the dust settled. At exactly 080 Council Standard Time, Yoon Hana walked into the council chamber. She was alone. No guards, no aides, not even Soren, who had wanted to come but was told to stay at the embassy. Hana wore the same dark suit she had worn for every one of her 23 failed petitions. Her hair was pulled back. Her shoes were clean. She carried a single datapad under her arm. She walked to the center of the chamber floor, the same spot where she had stood so many times before, and stopped. She looked up at the assembled delegates. The chamber was only half full. Many seats were empty, their occupants having decided that being somewhere else was healthier. But enough remained. Voshan was in his high seat, and that was what mattered. "I am here to present Earth's terms," Hana said. Her voice was clear and carried easily through the silent chamber. Voshan leaned forward. "You are in no position to present terms. You have committed an act of aggression against—" "I am here to present Earth's terms," Hana repeated, in exactly the same tone, at exactly the same volume, as if he had not spoken at all. Voshan stopped. His mouth stayed open for a moment, then closed. Around the chamber, delegates shifted in their seats. Several of them looked away from Voshan. That small gesture said more than any speech could. Hana activated her datapad and read. First, immediate and unconditional full membership for Earth, with equal voting rights, effective today. Second, the guidance mandate is dissolved. No overseer will be sent to Earth. No overseer will ever be sent to Earth. Third, financial reparations for 50 years of excessive taxation, trade restrictions, and intellectual property seizure. The amount has been calculated by our economists and is included in the attached document. It is not negotiable. Fourth, a formal public apology from the Council, broadcast to every member world, acknowledging the unjust treatment of humanity during the provisional period. Fifth, a new charter amendment guaranteeing that no species may be held in provisional membership status for more than 5 standard years. Any extension requires the unanimous consent of the species in question. She lowered the datapad and looked directly at Voshan. "These are the terms." The chamber buzzed. Delegates whispered to each other. Some of them were reading the attached document on their own screens. The reparation figure was large, but not crippling. The charter amendment would affect not just humanity, but every future species that joined the Council. It was, Soren would later realize, the most important item on the list. Because it meant humanity was not just fighting for itself. Voshan tried everything. He argued that the terms were excessive. Hana waited for him to finish and said, "These are the terms." He threatened economic sanctions. Hana waited and said, "These are the terms." He suggested a compromise, partial membership with a review period. Hana did not even blink. "These are the terms." He spoke about the long friendship between Earth and the Council. He spoke about shared values and mutual respect. His voice was warm and reasonable, and anyone who did not know the history might have believed him. Hana listened to all of it. When he finished, she said nothing for several seconds. The silence was so complete that Soren, watching from the embassy on a secure feed, could hear the hum of the station's life support systems. Then Hana spoke. "Grand Arbiter, in 50 years I have stood on this floor 23 times. I have been polite, I have been patient. I have followed every protocol and respected every tradition of this chamber. And 23 times you looked down at me and told me that my people were not good enough. So I want you to understand something clearly. I am not here to negotiate. I am not here to argue. I am not here to ask. I am here to tell you what is going to happen. And what is going to happen is this." She held up the datapad. "You will sign this, not because you want to, not because you agree, but because outside that window there are 47 reasons why you do not have a choice. And every single one of them was built by the people you spent 50 years calling immature." The chamber was so quiet that Soren could hear her own heartbeat. Delegate Puri stood up. The small Eloni representative looked around the chamber, then spoke. "I support Earth's terms, in full, without amendment. Another delegate stood, then another, then 6 more. Species that had watched humanity struggle for decades and done nothing were now standing up one by one, not out of courage, but because they could see which way history was moving, and they did not want to be on the wrong side of it. Voshan watched them stand. He watched his power dissolve like smoke in an open room. He looked at Hana, and she looked back at him, and there was nothing in her eyes that he could use. No fear he could manipulate. No uncertainty he could twist. She was simply done. She had been done for a long time. He just had not noticed. He sat down. He picked up his stylus. He signed. The document flashed once, confirming the signature, and was automatically transmitted to every member world in the galaxy. Hana looked at the screen of her datapad. She saw the confirmation. She allowed herself one slow breath, in through the nose, out through the mouth, and then she turned and walked out of the chamber. In the embassy, Soren was crying. She did not realize it until Hana walked through the door and looked at her with something that might have been a smile. "Send it to Earth," Hana said. "All of it." Soren sent the message. Across human space, on Earth, on the colonies, on ships and stations and outposts, people received the document. They saw the signature. And then, slowly, across every world that humanity had ever touched, there was a sound. It was not cheering exactly. It was not crying. It was something deeper and quieter, like the sound a person makes when they have been holding their breath for 50 years, and they finally let it go. 6 months later, Yoon Hana walked into the Galactic Council chamber and sat down. It was the same room, the same dark stone walls, the same elevated seats arranged in a great circle, the same pale light from the dead star outside. Everything was the same, except for one thing. There was a new seat on the main floor, equal in height to every other full member's seat, with a small blue flag mounted on its edge. Earth's flag. Hana sat in it the way a person sits in a chair they have earned, without ceremony, without hesitation, without looking around to see if anyone objected. She placed her datapad on the desk in front of her, folded her hands, and waited for the session to begin. No one objected. Delegate Puri, sitting 3 rows up, caught Hana's eye and gave a small nod. Hana nodded back. It was a tiny gesture, but Soren, watching from the gallery above, understood what it meant. It meant that some bridges had been built, not with speeches or treaties, but with small moments of decency, stretched across years of silence. Across human space, the changes came quickly. The excessive taxes were rolled back. Inspection checkpoints were dismantled. Human scientists were granted full access to the Galactic Technology Archives, and within weeks, they had downloaded more data than the Council's archivists could track. Colonies that had struggled under unfair tariffs for decades suddenly had room to breathe, to grow, to build. On a dozen different worlds, families who had spent generations bowing their heads lifted them up and looked at the sky with different eyes. But the changes were not just about Earth. Admiral Han Doyen stood on the bridge of the Baekdu for the last time as a wartime commander. The fleet had remained at the Council capital for 3 months after the signing, not as a threat, but as a reminder. A quiet, patient, steel and fire reminder that words on a document were only as strong as the will behind them. Now, with the new charter amendment ratified and the first reparation payments confirmed, it was time to go home. Doyen called his fleet together on a shared channel, 47 ships, their crews standing at attention on their respective bridges, listened as their admirals spoke. "When I was young," Doyen said, "I watched my parents stand in the corner of our house while strangers went through our things. I told myself that when I grew up, I would build something that would make sure no one ever had to do that again. I spent 30 years building it. We all did. And I want you to know that I hoped, truly hoped, that we would never have to use it." He paused. Through the viewport, the council station hung in the dark, its lights steady and ordinary. "We used it once," he said. "One shot, one day. That is all it took. And now, I am going to tell you something that I need every one of you to hear. That was enough. It will always be enough. We proved what we needed to prove, and we did it without becoming the thing we fought against. I am proud of every single one of you. Now let's go home." The fleet broke formation and turned toward Earth. Doyen watched the council station shrink in the viewport until it was just another point of light among millions. Then he went to his quarters, sat on the edge of his bed, and let himself feel the weight of everything he had carried for 3 decades. It pressed down on him like gravity, and for the first time in years, he did not push back against it. He just sat with it. Then he took a long breath and went to fill out the paperwork for his transfer to peacetime logistics. Tejo found him the next morning in the administrative office, filling out forms. He stared at Doyun as if the admiral had lost his mind. "You are the most dangerous man in the galaxy," Tejo said, "and you want to manage supply shipments?" "Somebody has to make sure the cargo arrives on time," Doyun said, without looking up. "You are insane." "Probably." Tejo shook his head and left, but Soren noticed that he was smiling. The ripple effect spread faster than anyone expected. Other species that had been stuck in provisional status for decades, bullied, taxed, and ignored just as humanity had been, began to demand their rights under the new charter amendment. The Aloni were the first. Puri stood before the council and formally petitioned for full membership, citing the 5-year limit that Earth had fought to establish. Hana sponsored the petition personally. She stood and spoke in favor of the Aloni, with the same calm, clear voice she had used 23 times before, except this time, she was not asking, she was recommending. And when the vote came, it passed unanimously. Not because the council had suddenly become fair, but because every delegate in the room could still see the shadow of 47 warships behind Hana's polite smile. Quan Minjae, the engineer who talked to engines like they were old friends, did something that changed the galaxy more than any fleet ever could. He published Earth's technological advances, the drive systems, the energy weapons, the shield innovations, openly and freely, available to any species that wanted them. He posted the designs on the Galactic Network, with a note that read, "From the people you said couldn't do it, you're welcome." The Council's old power structure had been built on controlling technology, keeping it locked behind access permissions and membership tiers, so that the powerful stayed powerful and the weak stayed weak. Minjae's release blew the doors off. Within months, smaller species were building things the Council had told them were impossible. The balance of power did not just shift, it dissolved and reformed into something new, something that no single species could control. Soren visited the Bekdu one last time before it was decommissioned. The ship was being retired to a museum orbit around Earth's moon, where it would circle silently as a monument. She walked through its empty hallways, past the bridge where she had watched history change, past the engine room where Minjae had shown her the drive that could not exist, past the briefing room where Doyen had said one shot and meant it. She found the memorial wall in the main corridor. It was a large flat panel of dark metal, polished to a mirror finish. There were no names on it, no dates, no inscriptions. It was completely blank. Minjae was there, running his hand along the edge of the frame. The Admiral designed it himself, a blank wall. No names, because no one died. He wanted it that way from the beginning. He said it should stand as a reminder of what we were willing to risk and what we chose not to spend. Soren stared at her own reflection in the dark metal. She thought about her parents. She thought about their house, and the inspectors, and her mother's voice saying, "Because we have to, for now." She thought about how, for now, had lasted 17 years of her life, and 50 years of humanity's life in the galaxy, and how it had finally, at last, come to an end. She touched the blank wall with her fingertips. It was warm from the ship's systems, like the last heartbeat of something that was going to sleep. Vashon was still alive. He still came to the council chamber every day and sat in the back row, where no one important sat. He had been stripped of his title by a vote of no confidence 2 months after the signing. No one punished him. No one imprisoned him. No one shouted at him or demanded justice. He was simply moved to the back of the room and forgotten. He sat there now, watching the galaxy reorganize itself without him, and that was his sentence: to be present for everything and relevant to nothing. On the last page of this story, Hana stood on the observation deck of the council station. The viewport stretched from floor to ceiling, and beyond it, the stars burned in every direction, steady and endless. She had a cup of tea in her hand, a habit she had picked up from Doyun, and she was watching the light. Soren found her there. She stood beside the ambassador and looked out at the same stars. They were quiet for a while. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who have been through something together and come out the other side. "Do you think they will ever try it again?" Soren asked. She took a sip of her tea and watched a transport ship drift past the viewport, its running lights blinking steadily in the dark. "Maybe," she said, "power makes people forget. Time makes them brave. Someday someone in this chamber will look at humanity and think that we have gone soft, that we have forgotten how to fight, that our patience means we are weak." She took another sip, and on that day they will learn the same lesson Vashon learned, that our patience is not weakness. It never was. It is a choice, and the moment we stop choosing it, the galaxy will remember why they should have been grateful that we chose it for as long as we did. Soren looked at her. "That is not very comforting." Hana smiled. It was a real smile, small and warm, and just a little bit tired. "It is not supposed to be comforting, Soren. It is supposed to be true." The stars burned on, as they always had, and always would, indifferent to the small creatures who fought and built and endured beneath them. But among those small creatures, on a station that floated in the dark between worlds, a species that had been told for 50 years that it was not good enough, had finally taken its seat. And it had done so, not by burning the galaxy down, but by showing that it could, and choosing not to. That was the human way. That had always been the human way, and the galaxy, whether it liked it or not, would never forget it.